Hi there, it's Eric the Tech, and today I'm going to show you how to use Build with Pod to do a complete takeoff on a 2-story house. And I hope you've had your coffee for today because we're going to go into detail so you can familiarize yourself with our program. We're going to start with the first step, which is converting our PDF files into a format that our program can use. And to do that, we're going to click on the Plan Pages button on our program. And now that our files are open, we're going to pick what files we're going to use. And we're going to use the PDF titled S3 layout. And now we're going to choose what pages we're going to use from that PDF. And lucky for us, it's only one page long. So first page and last page are both one. And now we're going to press Prepare Pages so that the program can convert our PDF. And we're going to do the same thing with another PDF, which also turns out to be one page long. And that's titled S4 layout. And we're going to choose page 1 again. And we're going to press Prepare Pages. Now that we have our files converted, we can open them up in our program. And we're going to start with S3 layout because that's what shows the first floor. And we're going to click Open, and there's our file. Now that we've converted our plans into a useful format, we can open them up, and we're going to start with the S3 layout plan because that shows our first floor. So to open it up, we're going to press Open File, and we're going to look for S3 layout, and we're going to open it up. And as you can see, here's our first floor plan. And now we're going to start a new lumber list. And to do that, we're going to press the Start Excel button on our program. And we're going to give our new lumber list a name. And for now, we're just going to call this Demo List. And we're going to press OK. And the program opens up a blank spreadsheet that we can use. And the lumber list that comes with our program has all the types of lumber that you could possibly need. And now in our program, we're going to start measuring out some materials. And we're going to start off with our studs. And since we're measuring our studs, we're going to press stud mode on our program. And before we start measuring, we have to enter the spacing for our studs. And to do that, we're going to click on this drop down menu right under the label that says spacing for studs. And we're going to use 12 inches on center because that's what the plan dictates. Before we start measuring, we're going to look for the appropriate cell that we're going to fill in on our lumber list. And to do that, we're going to click on the Excel logo at the bottom of our screen. And we're going to look for the cell corresponding to our 2x6 studs at 11 feet long. And we're going to look for the longer ones, which are Douglas fir studs at 128¼ inches. And so we're going to look for the green cell, which denotes that it's a nominal lumber. And we're going to click on it. And in this case, it's the cell on column H and row 69. Now that we have our appropriate cell, we're going to start measuring. And to measure using our program, we're going to left click on a corner of our walls, and then we're going to keep on left clicking on any corners that we need to measure out our walls. And to add the length of our walls to our total length, we're going to right click, and we can keep on looking for more corners so that we can add all of our walls to our total length. And it looks like we have all of our longer 2x6 studs at 11 feet tall. And so now we're going to fill in our total value on our lumber list. And to do that, we're going to click on the Update Cell button on our program. And if we take a look on our lumber list, we'll notice that the value is correct. And now that we have our longer studs, we're going to pick the cell corresponding to our shorter 2x6 studs at 11 feet tall. And based on the requirements set by our plans, we're going to add some shorter walls wherever the shear wall schedule denotes. And so we're going to add our walls the same way that we did earlier, by left clicking on our corners and then right clicking to add the value to our total. So we're clicking on the corners and then right clicking to add the value. And it looks like we have all of our extra walls. So we're going to press Update Cell again to add our value to our lumber list. Now that we're done with our external 2x6 studs, we can move on to our internal 2x4 studs. So we're going to pick the appropriate cell in our lumber list. And then we're going to start measuring again by using the same method as before. We're just going to left click on all the corners that we need on our walls, and then press right click to add them to our total. And for these internal walls, we're changing our spacing from 12 inches on center to 16 inches on center, because that's what the plan dictates. And now we're going to start measuring again. So we're going to look for an appropriate starting point, and left click, and then click on all the corners that we see, and right click to add that value. And it looks like we have all of our studs. So we click update cell, and our value is added to our lumber list. And now we're going to look at our shorter 2x4 studs. Which we add wherever there's any shearing material. That looks like all of our shorter 2x4 studs. So we're going to press update cell, and we're going to get that value onto our lumber list. Now we can move on to a different kind of material, which is going to be the plywood for our shearing. And according to the plan, it's going to be struck number 1 plywood at 1/2 inch thick. And in the dimensioning for the sheets, we're going to change from 4x10 to 4x11 feet, because that's how tall the walls are on this floor. And to measure, we're going to be using total mode, and we're just going to click on either end of our shear walls, and then right click to add the length to our total value. And we're going to keep on adding some more shear walls using the same method, where we click on either side of the wall, and then right click to add the length to our total value. And we're going to do this for all of our shear walls, including the ones on the outside of the house and the ones on the inside of the house. Now that we've added all of our walls, we're going to click update cell to add the value to our lumber list. And if we check our lumber list, we'll see our value in the appropriate cell. And now that we're done with the shear for this floor, we're going to move on to some headers and beams. And with headers and beams, it's important to notice that beams can come in all kinds of different lengths. And we're going to keep on using total mode. And we're going to start off with our 6x10 headers. And so we're going to click on either side of our header, and then right click to add the length to our total value. And and we're gonna pay special attention to the green little number that shows up next to our header, and that shows us exactly how long it is. Our 6x10 headers come in 3 different lengths, which are 6, 8, and 10. And we're gonna change our spreadsheet to reflect this. And so we're gonna look for the 6x10 header and beam cells, and we're gonna change the length value from 18, 20, and 22 to 6, 8, and 10. And now we're gonna fill in each cell with the value that we got from our measurements. And it looks like we have 3 10-footers, 1 8-footer, and 1 6-footer of the 6x10 dimension. And we're gonna end up doing the same thing for all of our other nominal beams. Next, we're gonna measure a different dimension of beams. Which is gonna be our 6x6 headers. And once again, we have to pay special attention to the little green numbers that show up next to the header that give us the exact length. And that looks like all of our 6x6 headers. And it looks like they come in lengths of 4 and 6, with there being 2 4-foot long headers and 2 6-foot headers. And we're going to change those lengths again in our number list, and we're going to put in the value for each header. And now we're going to move on to our 6x12 headers. And we're going to do the same thing once more, paying special attention to the number that shows up. And it looks like we only have one 6x12 header at 10 feet long. So we're going to look for our 6x12 beam cells and change our length to 6. And then we're going to type in how many of those beams there are, which is 1. Now that we're done with our headers and beams, we're going to measure out some of our joists. And as the name suggests, we're going to use joist mode in order to do this. Before we start measuring, we're going to select our spacing from the drop-down menu under the label that says spacing for studs, joists, and rafters. And these particular joists are 12 inches off center. And in order to count up how many joists we have to click on one corner of the region that the joists cover, and then click on the exact opposite corner. And then we're going to right click when we want to add the joists to our total. And we're going to look for the cells that correspond to our TGI joist that we're measuring out. And these are going to be TGI 360 joists. And we're going to click on the cell that corresponds to how long our joists are, which is denoted by the length label right underneath all the buttons. Now that we have those taken care of, we're going to look at our TGI 110 joist with a 16-inch off-center spacing. And we change that once again in our drop-down menu. And we're going to click on one corner, and then click on the opposite corner, and then right-click to add our values. And it looks like we have a few joists that are 16 feet long. And we've added some more joists that are 22 feet long. So we're going to look for the TGI joists at the appropriate lengths. And we're going to fill in our values. Now that we're done with our TGI joists, we got to measure out some nominal floor joists. And from our plan, it looks like they're situated vertically rather than horizontally. So right under the little label that says rafter joist orientation, we're going to click on the button that says vertical. And we're going to add the joist in the same way by clicking on opposite corners and right clicking to add the total. And it looks like they were 12 feet long, so we're going to fill in the corresponding cell. that we're done with our joists, we're going to head back to some engineered beams that we forgot about. So we're going to measure out some 3.5 by 11 7/8 parallelogram beams. And we're going to pay special attention to the little number that shows up, which for these would correspond to 24 feet long beams. And it looks like we have a 20-foot long beam as well. And here's a 16-foot long beam. And an 18-foot long beam. We've also got another 16-foot beam. So it looks like we have two 16-foot long beams, one 18-foot long beam, one 20-foot long beam, and three 24 feet long beams at 3.5 by 11 7/8. And so in our spreadsheet, we're going to look for the cells corresponding to the beams with the dimension 3.5 by 11 7/8. And like we did earlier, we're going to change the length values for these beams. If needed. But it looks like we've got cells for 16, 18, and 20-foot long beams. We just need to change one of them so it reads 24 feet. We've added our two 16-footers, our one 20-footer, our three 24-foot beams, and we're also going to add our one 18-foot long beam. Now that we're done with those beams, we're going to move on to a different dimension beam. And that's going to be our 5.25 by 11 7/8 parallelogram beams. It looks like we've got one 26-footer, and we've got a 22-footer, and that looks like it's all of our beams that are dimensioned 5.25 by 11 7/8. And so we're going to look for the corresponding cells, and we're going to change our length values again. And then we're going to type in 1 and 1. Now we're going to move on to another different kind of beam. And that's going to be our 7 by 11 and 7/8 beams. And we've got one that's 24 feet long. We've got a 20-footer. And it looks like those are all of our beams with that particular dimension, which is 7 by 11 and 7/8. And we're going to look for our corresponding cells. And we're going to change one of the lengths to 24 feet. Then we're going to fill in that we have one 24-footer and one 20-footer. And now we're going to measure out our 5 1/4 by 18 parallel beams. And it looks like we have one 36-footer. And that's it. Or we're just going to keep looking just to make sure. And it looks like we were missing one. And this new one is 24 feet long. Or actually 22 feet long. So we're going to change our length values in the corresponding cells. And we're also changing the dimensioning from 5 1/4 by 14 to 5 1/4 by 18. And it looks like we have one of each. Now that we're done with our engineered beams, we're going to look for some 6 by 10 beams that we accidentally skipped over. And it's right here on the left side of our plan. And it is 26 feet long. We've also got another one that's 16 feet long. So we're going to change one of the lengths to 26. Or 22 in this case. And we'll look for another cell that we can change to a 6x10 beam at 26 feet long. And it looks like we've measured out all of our beams. And now we're going to move on to some of our posts. And we're going to change all of the 10-foot lengths to 11 feet because our first floor is 11 feet high. So we're going to look for all the 10-foot posts on our lumber list, and we change their value. And when it comes to posts, we're going to end up using our count mode. And based on our plan, there's going to be a 4x post wherever we see a diamond shape. And because our outer walls are 2x6 studs, we're going to end up using 4x6 posts wherever we see a diamond. And now we're going to start adding up our 4x6 posts at 11 feet tall. And we're just going to keep on clicking everywhere we see a 4x6 post and everywhere we see a little diamond. And we're going to keep on looking. And we're going to keep on clicking everywhere we see a 4x6 post. We're going to keep on clicking wherever we see our 4x6 post. And remember, that includes wherever we see these little diamonds that say H5 and H and M.
Much better.
And it looks like we have all of them, so we're going to pick our cell and we're going to click update cell to get our value onto our lumber list. And now we're going to count up some 6x8 posts at 11 feet tall. We're going to reset and clear our graphics again. And then we're going to look for the 6x8 post. And just to make sure we got all of them, we're going to look around the plan to see if we can find any more. And it looks like we've got all of our 6x8 posts. So we're going to go on and press update cell so we can get our value onto our lumber list. And now we're going to count up our 6x6 posts at 11 feet tall. We're going to choose the correct cell. And we're going to count up our 6x6 posts. And we're just clicking wherever we see a 6x6 post. And we're going to keep doing that until we find all of them.
That was a jump.
And it looks like we have all of them. So we're going to press update cell and we get the correct value into our lumber list. And that looks like all of our posts. So we're going to move on to another type of material, which is going to be the material for our block and rim. In order to get the right amount of blocking from our plan, we're going to measure the length along the joist areas for our 2x10 joists and rafters. And we're going to measure on each side. So there's going to be 2 lines on each region of equal length. And we're going to do that for each individual joist region. And now that we have all of our 2x10 blocking, we're going to press update cell to get our value into our lumber list. And now we're going to measure out the blocking at 1 3/4 by 11 7/8. And we're going to find that blocking between our engineered joists. And we're going to pick the corresponding cell. And we're going to measure our blocking using the same method we've already used. And that means we're going to measure out the span of our joist region on each side. And so that's going to give us 2 measurements for each region. Remember, we're going to measure across our joist region twice so that we get the correct amount of blocking. And we're going to do this wherever we see our engineered joists. And it looks like we have all of our blocking for our engineered joist, so we're going to press update cell to get our total value into our lumber list. And we're going to move on to a different kind of material, which is going to be the material for our sill plate and for our cripple studs. And so we're going to scroll up so we find the appropriate cells on our lumber list. And we're going to pick the cell corresponding to the 2x6 crib and sill. So to get our crib and sill, we're going to measure twice across each of our windows. And we're going to make sure that we get every single one of our windows. So we're going to go around the entire plan. And it looks like we have all of our crib and sill for this floor. So now we're going to move on to our P&L material. And in order to calculate our P&L material, we're just going to count up all of the rooms on our first floor. And that includes your bedrooms, the kitchen, and the closet. And so in order to count the rooms, we're going to look at our architectural page. And so now we're going to open up the architectural page. And we're going to turn on count mode so we can count up the rooms. And we're going to press update cell, and the value gets calculated into our spreadsheet. Now that we're done with our blocking material, we can move on to the second floor of our project. And that means we got to start with the studs all over again. And on this floor, we're going to do 10-foot studs. And we're going to start with our 2x6 studs on the outside of our house. And so we're going to measure just like we usually do by clicking on all the corners of our walls, and then right clicking as soon as we want to increase our total value. And so remember, we're measuring around the entire building. So we're going to keep on clicking, and then right clicking whenever we want to increase our value. And now we're going to measure out our shorter studs on the outside of our house. And we're going to add those shorter studs wherever the shear wall schedule dictates. So we're just going to measure our shear walls and right click to add the length to our total. So we're going to keep on measuring our shear walls. And then as soon as we're done measuring our shear walls, we're going to press update cell to add the value to our lumber list. And now we're going to measure our internal 2x4 studs. And we're going to use 12 inches on center as our spacing, which we change using our drop down menu. And we're going to measure it out. And we're going to be right clicking a lot of times on our internal walls, because they go in all kinds of different directions. And we're going to keep on adding the different parts of our internal walls to our total. And we're going to keep on measuring until we have all of our internal walls measured out. And now that we have all of our internal walls, we're going to click Update Cell to add the value to our lumber list. And now we're going to measure out the shorter internal studs. And remember, we're adding the shorter studs wherever the shear wall schedule dictates. And it looks like we just did an oopsie, because we forgot to reset the value of our studs before measuring out our shorter studs. So each time we start a new material, we just have to make sure that we're resetting our value each time. And we're going to measure again wherever we see our internal shear walls. And that looks like all of our studs for this second floor. So now we're going to move on to the plywood material that we're going to use for our shearing. And just like on the first floor, we're going to be using 1/2 inch thick plywood at struck number 1. So we're going to pick the correct cell, and then we're going to measure out all of our shearing material. And so once again, we're going to be measuring our shear walls, but this time we're doing every single shear wall, including the ones on the inside and the outside. And so we're just going to add up the shear walls. And it looks like we have all of our shear material. So we're going to press update cell to get our value into our lumber list. Now that we're done with our shearing material, we can move on to the headers and beams for the second floor. And it looks like we're going to start with our 6x6 headers. And we're going to pay attention to how long the headers are. So far we have two 10-foot headers and one 4-foot header. And now we have an 8-foot header and another 10-foot header. And one more 8-foot header. And we're going to add a few 4-foot headers. And that looks like all of our 6x6 headers. So we're going to go to our lumber list. And we're going to check what lengths we have available. Nope. And it looks like we still have a few more to go. So we just have to make sure that we're getting every single 6x6 header. Okay. So now we're going to check what lengths we have in store. And it looks like we're going to have to change a few of these lengths. So we're going to put in a 10-foot cell, a 4-foot cell, a 6-foot cell, and an 8-foot cell. And based on our measurements, we have 10 4-foot long headers. And we have a few 6-foot headers. And for our 8-foot headers, we have a couple of them. So we're going to type in 2. And now we're going to check out our 10-foot headers. And it looks like we have 1, 2, and 3. That's it for our 6x6 headers. And now we're going to measure out our 6x12 headers. And on this floor, it looks like we only have one 6x12 header. And it looks like our 6x12 header is 20 feet long. So we're going to type 1 in the corresponding cell. And now we're going to measure out our 6x10 headers on the second floor. It looks like we have one 12-footer. And we have one 16-footer. And it looks like we have a few more, so we're going to measure those as well. It looks like we found a 20-footer and a 10-footer. And we've got one more 20-footer. And we're going to look for some more 6x10 headers. Looks like we found one 34-foot long 6x10 header. And we've also got one more 12-footer. So now we're going to look for the appropriate cells in our lumber list. And once again, we're going to have to change some of the lengths on the lumber list. And we've already put in our two 20-footers. And now we entered our one 18-footer. And we're going to enter our 34-footer. Now that we're done with our 6x10 headers and beams, we're going to move on to measure our 6x8 headers and beams. And it looks like we have a 14-footer, and we've also got an 8-footer. And it looks like that's all of our 6x8 headers and beams. So we're going to go back into our lumber list. We're going to find the appropriate cells. And we're going to fill in one for our 14-footers. and we're going to change one of the lengths on the number list to 8. We're going to type 1 into the corresponding cell. And it looks like that's it for our 6x8 beams. Now that we're done with the headers and beams for this floor, we're going to move on to count up some posts. And on this floor, all of our posts are going to be 10 feet tall, because that's how tall the second floor is. And we're going to start with our 4x6 posts, which are added wherever we see the little diamonds that say H5. So we're going to click around and get all of our 4x6 posts. And we're also clicking on all the little diamonds that say M. So we're going to keep on clicking until we have all of our 4x6 posts. Now that we have all our posts, we're going to click Update Cell to add the value to our lumber list. And if we check out our lumber list, we'll see the correct value. And now we're going to count up our 6x6 posts at 10 feet tall. And again, we're going to reset our value and then press Clear Graphics so we can have a clean picture. And we're going to start clicking on all of our 6x6 posts. And we're going to keep on looking all over the plan to make sure we get all of our 6x6 posts. We're going to press update cell once we have all our posts, and we can check the value in our lumber list. And it looks like that's it for our posts on the second floor. So we're going to move on to a different kind of material. Now that we're done with our headers and beams for our second floor, we can move on to some of our ceiling joists. And we're going to be measuring some 2x10 ceiling joists. So we're going to switch over to joist mode again. And then we're going to pick the vertical orientation for our joists. And we're going to click on one corner of our joist region, and then click on the other corner, and then right click to add the value to our total. And we're going to do the same for this other section of joists, where we click on one corner and the opposite corner, and right click to add to our value. And there's one more section of 2x10 ceiling joists. But these joists are horizontal, so we're switching our orientation back to horizontal. And it looks like we have all of our 2x10 ceiling joists. And now we're just gonna open up the corresponding cells on our lumber list. And remember, we're gonna update the cell for every length of joists. And for this plan, we only had 8-foot and 10-foot joists. Now that we're done with that, we're gonna measure out some material for our ledgers and blocks on this floor, and that's going to be 2x10 material. And we're going to measure it out the same way we did blocking on the first floor, which is drawing 2 lines along our joist section. And so we're going to draw 2 lines on each section of ceiling joist that we have. I'm just clicking on one side and then the other side, and then right clicking to add to our total. And that looks like we have all of our blocks and ledgers. So we're just gonna pick the correct cell on our lumber list. And we're gonna click the cell corresponding to the 2x10 ledgers. And I'm gonna press update cell. And now we have our value in our lumber list. Now that we're done with that, we're gonna use our area mode so that we can measure out the material for our floor and for our roof. And for the floor material, we're going to scroll up in our lumber list, and we're going to find the 1 1/8 inches thick plywood at struct number 1. And we're going to pick one of the red cells because we're dealing with plywood. and we're going to pick our mode, and then we're going to click on all the corners in the region that we want flooring for. So we're going to look for our corner so we can start. Then we're going to click on the next corner, and we're going to keep on clicking on all the corners of our floor region. And we're going to keep on clicking until all the corners in the floor section are covered. And then once we have all our corners, we're going to right click to fill in the section. And we're going to press update cell to add the plywood to our lumber list. And now we're going to measure out the material for our roof. And we're going to calculate the material for our roof using the same method that we just used. Our roof, we're going to use 1/2 inch thick plywood. So we're going to pick the red cell that we need. And then we're going to start clicking on the corners of our roof section. So we're going to keep on adding all the corners that we need. And we're going to go around the entire plan because the roof goes all over the top of the building. And then once we've clicked on all the corners, we're going to right click to highlight our section. And then we're going to press update cell to add the value to our lumber list. Now that we're done with our roof and our floor material, we're going to count out our P&L material using the count mode. And again, we're going to open up our architectural drawing so we can see all of our rooms. And we're going to click wherever we see a room. And that includes the bathroom and the closets. So we're going to click around on all of our rooms and closets. And then in our spreadsheet, we're going to look for the correct cell for our P&L on the second floor. And we're going to click update cell. And we get our value in our lumber list. Now that we're done with that, we're going to go back to our structural drawing for the second floor. And we're going to measure out some extra materials that we skipped over. And we're going to use total mode again. And we're going to measure out the material for our crib and sill. And we're going to measure out the crib and sill the same way we did on the first floor by measuring the length of each window twice. And the first time around, we're just looking for all our windows. So we're going to measure it once. And then once we have all of them, we're going to measure them once more. And that looks like all of our crib and sill material. So we're going to look for the right cell. And we're going to press update cell to get the value into our lumber list. Now that we're done with our cripple stud and sill plate, we're going to add the length of our trellis. And we're going to go back to the structural drawing of the first floor. And we're just going to count up the 4x12 trellises. And we're going to update the cell. And last but not least, we're going to add some of the material for our stairs. And so everywhere we have stairs, we're going to add 4 stringers and 4 BAT pieces at 20 feet long. And now we're going to measure out how much material we need for our tread and rise. And so we're going to use total mode to measure the length of the stairs. And it looks like we have 9 pieces of tread and rise plywood. And it looks like we have all the material that we need for this house. So we're going to click on the clean up list button at the top of our program. And then it's going to ask us if we're sure, and we'll press yes. And then it'll ask us again, because this is a final process. And now we can see our lumber list is shortening in real time. And right now it's going through every single row to make sure it deletes all of the empty rows. And at the end of the day, we're left with a much shorter lumber list with all the materials that we're going to need. And now that we're done with our tutorial, I'd like to thank you for staying with us for the entire video. Thank you and goodbye.